Okay, well, welcome everyone to this week's drop-in session. I'm going to get started. So when I'm thinking about this process, I want to think about, first of all, where does it start and where does it finish? So in my case here, I'm just going to start off with, I've got a customer that is hungry, and I'm going to finish the process, or I know this is finished when the customer has their order. Okay, so I'm purely looking at the steps that happen between that. Now, I have a very particular vendor in mind as I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to say the name of the vendor. Hopefully some of you will recognize this as I go through it, because it's a fairly specific way that they do this particular process, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to draw this one out. So basically, a customer is hungry, and I'm going to start off with an activity of enter the store and approach counter. Okay, we'll just keep this very easy. Then the member of staff is going to greet the customer. They are then going to identify. Some of this is going to sound strange, some of the wording I'm going to put in here, but I'm going to identify the main billing. And at this point, you might start to realize who the vendor is. They're going to identify additional fillings. They're going to add source to this item. Then they're going to wrap the, I'm going to call this the order. They're going to ask if there are any additional items. Then they're going to take payment for the item, and then the person is going to pick up a drink if necessary, and that will hopefully end with the customer having the order. So you'll see in a few minutes I've very quickly outlined the main steps in the process. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back and just think about, okay, so they've entered the store and approach the counter. So I'm going to put here an output of customer knows what they want. I'm not sure if that's quite right, but let's go with that for now. So going to greet the customer, and at this point, having done that greeting, we're going to have worked out what type of bread and size of sandwich the customer wants. What type of the customer wants is identified. Okay, so identify the main filling. Now I've got an interesting thing here, because at this point there's two things that actually outcome from this part of the process. Having identified the main filling and done it, what they do in this particular store is they'll then ask you, do you want this toasted or not? So there are two potential outputs here. Customer requires toasted bread, or customer doesn't require toasting. Now, this is a very common thing that happens at this point, is having kind of realized that at that point in the process, we've got two outputs. There is actually an extra step that's missing here. So I'm going to quickly add that in over here. And that is, someone actually needs to toast the sandwich there. So I quickly capture that. And then I'm just going to put in here sandwich ready for additional fillings. So I'm going to go through to the next step there. So identify any additional fillings. So in this case, I'm going to put sandwich which is full. I was saying to somebody yesterday, it was interesting when you're trying to type in front of other people, your fingers sort of trip over each other. So, but I haven't done too bad of spelling so far. So I'm going to add source here. So I'm going to put sandwich is ready to complete order. Now, again, doing this on my own is always a little bit harder because I'm just sort of trying to interpret what I think might be the outputs of this stage. Obviously, if you're doing this in a conversational environment, different people have different opinions, both on what the description of the activities is and the output. So it will generally take a little bit longer when you do it that way, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to sort of do this first session with just kind of talking it through and demonstrating it as we go, given the sort of short amount of time that we have in these sessions. So again, I'm kind of, as I said, I'm sort of just putting in what I think this should be, but obviously it would be open to discussion if you were doing it in a conversational environment. So I've got wrapping the order. So sandwich is ready for customer. Now you might want to be a bit more specific at this point. So I might want to say something like, the sandwich has been put into a, trying to think of a word, a packaging that's safe to transport or something like that. Again, if you wanted to be a bit more specific. So now we move on to this bit here. So ask if there are additional items. So there could be different things in here. So actually, when I was sort of thinking about this earlier on, about this particular step, I was being quite specific about, okay, at this point in this process, you get asked, would you like to add a cookie and or a drink to your order? So I was thinking, is it dessert? But here I'm just asking for additional items. But having kind of now thought about that through, I might just want to capture that information here against the activity. So I'm just going to use a simple text field here, and I might say what additional options might the customer require, and then I'm just going to put this as some bullet points. Cookie or a drink. My bullet point didn't quite work on there. Oh, it's because I needed an extra line. Cookie or a drink. I can sort of save that there. You might also then, again, what will often happen in these sorts of situations is then the sort of conversation opens up and someone says, oh, but actually we have special offers. So they might say, yeah, I'm going to take a chocolate chip cookie, but actually we do three for the price of two or something like that. Or there's a meal deal where you can get a packet of crisps as well in there. So actually that's another one. Let me add that. Crisps might also be included in the offer, but again, I can very quickly just add that text description. So make sure to mention any offers that are available as well. Yeah, and immediately as I write that, I think forward to taking the payment. So I think this particular store has some sort of loyalty card. So while you're taking the payment, you might also request loyalty card. So again, you can see how these sort of, from the first pass at mapping this process, I didn't necessarily remember everything that might be important to it, but as you sort of go through each of the steps, you sort of start thinking, oh, actually, we need to, that's going to be useful and that's going to be important. And I think that's a really useful point to make, because I know when I've coached teams, is that sometimes they'll sort of start mapping the process right at the beginning and they think, I've got to capture everything that's related to that particular step before I can move on. And actually, that's not really the case. You want to sort of focus on the bit that's pertinent. So you can see how I started here was I just wanted to think about the activities. And as you start talking about them, different things come up. So Here again, I'm going to say 2 outputs for this particular box, because one I've got, maybe they want actually, do you know what? I was going to put 2 outputs for this. So I was going to put an output for customer wants additional items. Sorry, again, spelling's bad. And then the other output I was going to put there was customer doesn't want additional items. And then as I think forward to this, is actually, am I going to end up going into another activity? I suppose I could have another activity where we go and put the cookie in a bag and so on. But actually, if they're buying a drink, they pick the drink up themselves afterwards. So I don't necessarily have to do that. We could just say, as part of the activity of them asking if they have any additional items, you could just include the act of giving it to them in there. Again, not unusual for this sort of thing to happen in mapping, where you at that point we put the two outputs, but then we come back to it and go, do you know what, let's just simplify that and have a single output. And so this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to additional items added to order as required. Okay, now again, you might then, having looked at that, you might go back and go, okay, well, does that activity now make sense? Because is all I'm doing asking them if there are any additional items, or is this a set of activities all to do with providing the additional items? So actually, I might just rewrite this as well. So add any desserts, crisps, or drinks as required. Okay, so again, it's not unusual to go back as the discussion unfolds to go and update, change, refine the names of activities as you're doing it. So next I'm going to take payment. So I'm going to put in here, just as an output, full payment received in by card or cash, and then the customer can then go and pick up the drink, and we get to the end of the process. I guess I could actually also, that output there could be different. It could be receipt provided to customer. We don't always, not everybody wants a receipt, but again, it's just something that helps me understand when that activity was complete. So now I can go back and I might start joining my lines up. I could go through and now put my roles against this. So maybe I'm going to do that. So first thing I'm going to do is enter the store and approach. The counter is going to be the customer. So I'll start putting in customer against that. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is greet the customer is going to be, I'm going to call this the shop assistant. Don't know if I have that role in there. I don't, so I'm going to add that in there. Now, actually, what I've got here is most of these steps is going to be done by the shop assistant, except the last box there, which I'm just going to make the customer again. Now, one of the things that I'm going to show you, if you weren't aware of this already, so obviously to go and edit and add roles in there, I can double click on the box. But because I've got a number of boxes on there that have the same role, I could go into each one of them and add it. But what I can also do to help save me a little bit of time is if I click on the attachment icon, I will have the roles available for me on the list on the left there. Now there's a button here. I don't know if anyone is, if many of you have seen this before, but if I click on that to select it, I get this little button that then says copy selection. So I click on that. That's basically copied the role. And then what I should be able to do is go through, select all of the boxes that have the same role, go over to the edit menu, click paste selected content, and you'll see it's automatically put the roles on all the boxes. So again, if you've got that sort of situation, it's really good for quickly doing that. And you can do it in multiple items as well. So if you've got multiple roles that you want to copy, that option to copy works with all attachments as well. So you see all of my text attachments I've got there. I can select that item, works for custom fields and so on as well. So again, that's really useful for quickly doing that. So now I've got my main activities. I've done my outputs, got my roles against it. I could put systems. I'm not going to in this case. We could put any systems that we're using against this here. So take payment. I might have the I forget what it's called, the payments pay point or whatever you'd call it, that you'd actually do that. I might even include the oven for toasting the sandwich over the top there, but as I said, for now I'm just going to keep it simple. Now I'm going to start joining the lines up. One of the things I really like to do just before I do that, or as I'm doing this, is I'd actually go through in a conversational point and just read this out. So I've got a customer that's hungry. They're going to come into the store and approach the counter, and hopefully they'll know what they want, having read the menu. So the shop assistant's then going to greet the customer, and one of the things they're going to ask them is what sort of bread and what size of sandwich they want. Then the shop assistant's going to identify the main filling they want and ask them whether the bread needs toasted or not. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it from this. Actually, let's go. If they want the bread toasted, they're going to then toast the sandwich, and that's ready for additional fillings. So at this point, these two outputs are kind of the same thing. So I'm going to just try and make it say kind of the same thing. Basically, what they do is they're both going to go to the same next activity. And so just to try and keep it a little bit simple, I would probably tidy this up a little bit later on, but I'm just going to do it a bit like that. And oh, I did that thing there. Let me do that again. Join that line up to there. And you see what I did there just is I lined those two output boxes to the tops. And by doing that, it means the lines that come up that come down to the next activity join up like that. Again, in a workshop conversational situation, you don't necessarily have to worry too much about those things because you can tidy things up afterwards. But I always find if you can do it quickly and simply in the session, it just makes it a bit easier to follow. So shop assistant's going to ask about additional fillings, sandwich is full. They're then going to ask about what sort of sauce they want. When the sandwich is ready, they can wrap the order. The sandwich is ready for the customer. They can add any desserts as required. So again, there is a bit of a point here where you can sort of put in the question and kind of make some different routes through the process if you like. But as I said before, you saw I'd put the two outputs and then I decided actually I'm just going to collapse them into two. So sometimes you might be looking at this going, okay, not everybody's going to do this in the process. So here, the way I've managed that is I've kind of I've used the language to say as required. So, you know, implying that they might not require that particular item. You could easily split that out into two separate activities. So one where the shop assistant asks them if they want it, you know, whether they want anything additional, and then if they do, go and get it as a separate activity and then merge back into the main process. It'll depend on how the conversation plays out and the people involved. I've got the full payment. So again, customer can go and pick up the drink. Exactly the same situation here. And I'm going to do this one slightly different because actually, if the customer hasn't ordered a drink, they don't need to pick one up. So having full payment received on cash and card, customer might just have their order and off they go from that particular point. And there's my process very, very quickly mapped in there. So as I said, what I'd probably do now, if I had time in the workshop, we might tidy this up a little bit. But basically, I'll do that quickly now. I'm just going to select across that, space these out. I'm not going to try and put this all onto the same page right now, but I probably would do normally. Again, align those boxes. You'll see I've done the main process here of sort of 3 boxes across. So all I'm doing is aligning the boxes on each side of that. I should have probably done it with my outputs as well. So I'm just going to align those. And then what I can do is align, space all of those out. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, what I'm doing here is using the shortcut keys. So when I select a set of boxes, for example, in the row that I've done this here, I'm then going up using the arrange button, and I can do it from here. So what I did is I aligned my boxes to top, and then I distributed horizontally, but I did it using the shortcuts, the T and the H. So again, if you are in that sort of workshop conversational environment, learning the shortcut keys, and you can actually see them also by just going to select those boxes again down the bottom. It shows you some of the real common ones that you can use. It saves you a few seconds, but it does kind of really help speed things up and looks quite good. Only other thing that's happened there is you see this line has gone a bit funny after I've aligned them up. This is because that I had adjusted that line before, so it's trying to readjust itself according to the move that I made. So I'm just going to move that back like that. Now, I could go into more. Normally, what you then start to do is, okay, why were we mapping this process? Was there any additional information we wanted to know? So again, if you were looking at it, trying to understand how does the customer feel about this particular process, you might start going through and go, okay, what's the customer experience at each of these? Do they understand what's going on? Is there any challenges that they face? Or if you were looking at automating some of this or trying to make some sort of improvements, you might start going through and capturing those improvement ideas. Now, one of the reasons I always like this, I'm going to ask in a second if anyone can guess who the vendor is. One of the reasons I like this process is when I first went to the store from this particular company, I had been using another sandwich store down the street from them, and their process was completely different. And what was really good about this one is when you walked in the door, you could see exactly where you were supposed to go as a customer. The counter was designed in a straight line, so you basically followed this process as you went through the counter. You got to the checkout at the end, and then were able to go out the door. The other sandwich shop had this weird thing where you went to one counter, but you had to then wait on the other side of the room for your order, and then you had to cross back across the queue to get out the door, and it was quite confusing and a bit of a mess. So again, whether you're looking at something that's about information flowing through it, or whether you're mapping a physical process, you can use this now to sort of have those sorts of conversations about, okay, where do the challenges lie and what could we do to improve it?